How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here across the United States. Delighted to have you with me. The phone number is 877-973-0. I'm doing so many radio shows. What's the phone number? 877-973-07. No, you know what the phone number is. My brain is totally having a fart. I'm doing 7 hours of radio today, did yesterday and the day before, and I'm ending the number with the phone number for the other show. It's just one of those things. Nonetheless, y'all know how to call in. If you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, all of that. I want to take your phone calls, but you've got to be patient. All of you need to be patient with me, because I'm going to, with a little fear and intrepidation. Rarely do I get nervous about approaching a topic, but I'm going to go down this road with some news that has hit, and I want you all to know about it. So there's a group called the American Reformer. It is run by a guy named Nate Fisher. Nate Fisher is on Twitter and wants you to know we're in a post-constitutional America. He wrote this insane tweet. I understand nostalgia for the Constitution or longing to restore the principles the founders established. But if you will not accept the reality that this is long gone, if you judge others based on fidelity to a set of, in quotes, principles that govern no one, then you are a fool. And what this guy Nate Fisher and his publication advocate is for essentially an aggressive confrontation with the left in this country. And they have begun twisting traditional Christian values to say that, you know what, if you're a lying and deceitful person, but you're doing it to smite God's enemies, it's okay. We're actually seeing more and more of this in the country on the right as people essentially they twist the truth. They twist Scripture to meet their own ends. And it's unfortunate to see. I mentioned this the other day. There was a guy at this American Reformer piece. He's working on his PhD or has it, and says essentially that Christians will be praised for their faith if to fight God's enemies they lie and are deceitful. They necessarily use crude memes. Meanwhile, you've got Peter writing in 1 Peter, telling people to, quote, rid yourself of malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. And you've got the American Reformer saying, screw Peter, y'all need to go lie, get in people's faces, rough them up, use nastiness to advance your agenda. It's a worldliness that creeps in from Marxism that is pervasive in parts of the right, and they claim to be people of faith, and you wouldn't recognize them, and you by their faith. There's essentially a group of people who want you to say we need to impose a Christian nation, and in so doing, we need to reject Christianity to do it. I want to compare and contrast this with a story that has broken. Missouri State Representative Ben Baker represents an area of Missouri south of Joplin. He's in the state house. His daughter is dead today. His daughter is Natalie Baker Lloyd. She died with her husband, Davy Lloyd. Davy and Natalie Baker were murdered by a gang in Haiti. They are Christian missionaries. They were working with orphans and others in Haiti. A gang attacked them, set upon them, and murdered them. They were there to proclaim Christ's gospel and have been murdered. Let me just talk to you for a minute. When you so hate your neighbor, that you decide you can be unkind to your neighbor, graceless to your neighbor, and condemn your neighbor, that your neighbor is somehow bad in a way that you are not bad. I think you got a real problem. And I think it's a growing problem in this country on both sides. We've seen it for a while now with the contemptibleness of progressive activists in this country. Look at the attacks on Sam Alito and his wife. They're flying a rather innocuous flag that in New England is a very common flag for people to fly. It goes back to the days before the country. Massachusetts adopted it as a flag for the Massachusetts Colonial Navy. And people on the left are attacking the Alitos for flying this flag, saying, well, the insurrectionists in Washington flew it, therefore they're insurrectionists. They also flew the American flag, which, of course, there was a video that went viral last week of a progressive on a beach cussing out MAGA activists for flying the American flag on a beach. I've gone to the beach every year for spring break, and there's always somebody flying an American flag. I've never looked at it as a political thing, but this guy did. It's just bizarre. It's perverse, and there's this level of rage and anger on the left, but it's now beginning to poison people on the right. This is this guy Crenshaw from the American Reformer, which believes we're in a post-constitutional order and we need to, I guess, install a dictatorship or something to take over the country. This guy writes, politically active American Christians who defy the enemies of God and wage war against evil and who necessarily employ crude memes, subterfuge, and even deception towards these ends will likewise be commended for their faith. Contrast that to first century Rome, where Peter, on his way to his execution, writes, put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and evil and all slander. Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God. Look at the juxtaposition between the keyboard warriors on the right, who angrily bang away at their keyboard saying we need to lie, cheat, and steal just like the left, versus this couple who actually loved the Lord and went to Haiti and were murdered. There are a whole lot of people in this country who behind the keyboard, largely anonymously, can bang away about how we need Christian nationalism in the United States and Christ is king, they say, like Candace Owens, who's only doing it, peddling it as a pejorative of anti-Semitism. They speak very boldly and very brashly behind their keyboards. They're not willing to go to Haiti and risk death to spread the gospel. They can be brave behind the keyboard and urge you towards violence, but they're not going to put their life on the line to advance the gospel. They've decided that their purpose is greater than advancing the gospel. There's a sickness in the American right, and it's infected them from the left, where you have the left and the right these days in this country behaving exactly the same way. And you have people on the right justifying it and saying, well, we need to be just like them. I find this with some conservative talk radio show hosts who essentially say, we can't play by the rules anymore because the left doesn't play by the rules. And meanwhile, you got a lot of Americans out there thinking, my gosh, I would just love for a normal person to run for office. Can we have someone who's normal? What's so wild about this is the successes that the American right has had in the last number of years. Got a majority of state legislative districts in this country held by the GOP. Donald Trump won election, may win a re-election in 2024. His polling is good. You've got Republican control of the House. You got the first actual Christian evangelical Speaker of the House, and you're all ungrateful for that because you think he's too much of a squish because he only has a 2-seat majority and can't get anything done that you want done. So therefore, screw him, even though he's exactly the sort of person people said they wanted from the right. The right's not happy with it. There's this poisoned attitude that has set in. People are deeply malcontented, and they're actually happy by being malcontented. Contrast them with this couple. The father of the daughter is a political animal. He's in the state legislature. He's a state representative from Missouri. They could have stayed and gotten into politics and done that sort of thing. Instead, they decided they wanted to be missionaries. They went to Haiti. They died because of the gospel. Contrast their willing to die for the gospel to the keyboard warriors of the right who, banging away anonymously in their mother's basements and their offices, decide that we need to impose through government Christian nationalism. We need to have a takeover by the right and for the common good, have the government taken over by us and impose the common good on people. Contrast them willing to die in Haiti to a guy who says it's okay, you can necessarily employ crude memes, subterfuge, and even deception to defy the enemies of God and wage war against evil. Very high-minded, isn't it? We're not in a political fight against a side that disagrees with us. We're waging war against the enemies of God, and so we can lie, cheat, and steal just like them. That's actually completely contradictory to the message of the New Testament, which is why these guys like to quote the Old Testament so much. New Testament doesn't really serve their purpose, so forget about it. It's kind of disturbing. And I encounter it more and more, by the way. But it's almost always anonymous people. They're not really brave enough to out themselves. And they say, well, we don't live political lives. It could cost me my job. These people went to Haiti and it cost them their lives. You're worried about your job? They died serving the gospel. You're afraid someone might say, wow, this guy's a nut based on his insane, deranged ramblings on social media. Put your life in perspective, people. Put your life in perspective. We got a mind virus on the right, polluted from the left, and it's all from Marxism. All these people are they see politics and religion together as a cudgel. What did Marx say? Religion is the opiate of the masses. They will use religion to dope you up and keep you numb, and then they themselves will use just politics and raw power to take control. They don't really have your interests at heart. What's more is they're not willing to put their life on the line, just their keyboard. This couple was willing to go to Haiti to actually serve the poor, and they were murdered by Haitian gangs, while these guys bang their keyboards and demand some sort of change and a fight against their enemies. There are real fights to be had. Banging away at your keyboard really isn't one of them. Lying to people of faith, telling them they can behave like the people who aren't of faith, really isn't one of them. It's just this puts it all in perspective. These brave keyboard warriors who demand some sort of Christian rise up and fight the left as if they're the enemy of God, versus the missionaries who actually went to a part of this world where there actually is a real fight between good and evil and voodoo and all sorts of wild paganism. And those rabid pagan gangs, many of which are into voodoo worship and the like, they murdered these two people who were Christian missionaries. Put your life in perspective. Put your big boy pants on. The left is not your enemy in this country. They're your neighbor. You just disagree with them. I know you've existentialized it, but if you're not actually willing to march out and actually share the gospel and risk your life for it, well, maybe you should just shut up. Welcome back. All right. I want to go to one of the coolest named places on planet Earth, Caesar's Head, South Carolina, where John is waiting patiently. How are you?
I am good. I'm sitting in the cool, enjoying the nice weather.
Yeah, and you got elevation up there too. So you're what, third? I mean, it's over 3,000 feet, I guess, up at Caesar's Head. It's a pretty place.
We're about 3,500 where I am.
Nice. What's going on?
Yeah, it's nice. Well, been listening to it and enjoyed what you've been saying. Breaks my heart with the missionaries. My sister was a missionary for 9 years and was beaten and robbed and kidnapped and all sorts of things. And that was a great thing that you had to say about those and putting things in perspective. But getting to my point, we have such an easy election to win, and we have such a good blueprint to go by, but I don't hear anybody on a national level talking about it. We had Reagan's blueprint, the contract with America, and even Trump in 2016. And they had simple facts. Here's what we're going to do if you elect us. Don't focus on the person, focus on the facts. And it wins every time. And we don't seem to be doing that. We just seem to be fussing and fighting, and I'm anti-Trump this, or, I'm an always Trumper or never Trumper.
Right. I mean, it's funny.
That's kind of a hard thing for me.
John, I really kind of feel bad. I had a lady call me yesterday who was very upset with me for criticizing Trump, even as I acknowledged I preferred his policies, and so it was kind of a no-brainer of where to go. And my point to her was that, let's focus on the policies, because not everybody does like Donald Trump, but they loved his policy. So focus on the economy, focus on sealing the border, focus on American leadership in the world, and let people vote for him on the policies because they don't like where we are right now. You're absolutely right. If we focus on what our side is going to do, not the personalities of the people involved, but what our side is going to do, we're going to win the election. Black and Hispanic voters are moving our direction because they remembered the economy was good when Trump was president. They remembered the border was sealed under the existing laws. There are ways we can advance it. Like, for example, Americans for Prosperity is taking Americans to the border through the Americans for Prosperity Foundation. You can go to the border. They've invited me to go, and I couldn't because it was my daughter's graduation. You can stand at the border and watch the sea of humanity flow across. And what y'all don't realize, unless you see the visuals regularly, is the ecological damage being done there with people coming over. There's trash everywhere. They're taxing social services. And Americans for Prosperity has set up this website, Secure Border, Secure America, to, one, document what's happening and also show the common sense conservative solutions that could take care of this. And just as a reminder, as an aside, under the existing laws we have now, we didn't have this situation when Trump was president. It's something that AFP wants to remind people about. We have laws already we could be enforcing that take care of the situation. Go to securebordersecureamerica.com today. Securebordersecureamerica.com, and you can see we've got solutions available. We know what we need to do, and you can then get involved and tell your members of Congress to take action. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, be patient with me. I want to talk for just a moment about the situation in Israel in particular, but I want to tie it to something larger. If you're just tuning in the last half hour came word that 2 American missionaries in Haiti have been murdered by a gang down there. They were working, if I understand the story right, at an orphanage and a Christian relief center in Haiti. They've been murdered. The Haitian government collapsed. Haiti is in disarray. And actually, Cuba is looking at working with the Chinese to bring order there. The president of the United States last night had the Kenyan president at the White House, and he himself is working with trying to get Kenya to cover this. Kenya doing a peacekeeping operation in Haiti. That country and Haiti, Kenya and Haiti, have had historic ties. While this is happening, an international court with the United Nations for Human Rights has told Israel it's got to get out of Rafah. It's got to suspend its operation. Never mind, Hamas still exists. The Biden administration has taken no action. In fact, there's a growing number of people demanding the Biden administration do something because the Biden administration said it had all sorts of red lines. In fact, there's a piece in the Hamas-supporting Washington Post today. The headline is Biden administration straddles its own red line in Rafah. People are pointing out the hypocrisy of the Biden administration in this. Nearly 2 weeks into an Israeli offensive in Rafah, an invasion that President Biden warned months ago could be a red line for continued U.S. support, the administration says that line has not yet been crossed. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons to deal with that problem, Biden told CNN earlier this month, 3 days after IDF forces began operations on the outskirts of the city. In statement after statement, Biden and his top national security officials said the U.S. would not support a major military operation in Gaza's southernmost city, especially one that was not proceeding by a credible executable plan to ensure the protection and humanitarian support for 1.5 million Palestinians. Humanitarian organizations on the ground say the administration is refusing to acknowledge what it doesn't want to see. Now, many of those humanitarian organizations, like this UN court, are filled with anti-Semites who were never going to give Israel a fair shake. What is the administration going to do? In fact, I dare say that this United Nations court did what it did because it thought it could bring pressure on Joe Biden after all of his repeated statements about red lines in Israel. He is a fundamentally weak president. Fundamentally weak president. The IDF has recovered bodies of 3 hostages from northern Gaza who were killed on October 7th. They found the footage of Hamas organizing the gang rapes of the Israeli women who were taken hostage. We now have footage of a Hamas operative who brags about how he and his father went in on October 7th and together raped various women before the father killed the women. And yet Israel is supposed to disarm. This is from NBC News. The International Court of Justice on Friday ordered Israel to immediately halt its military assault on Rafah. The top United Nations court cited an immediate risk to Palestinians, noted that more than 800,000 people have been forced to flee Rafah since Israeli forces began ground operations in the area. Judge Nawaf Salam, president of the ICJ, said Israel had failed to sufficiently address and dispel concerns raised by the offensive, all while the catastrophic living conditions of Palestinians in the Strip had deteriorated further. What about the hostages? What about the hostages? They made no connection between what's happening and the hostages that are being held in Rafah. Nothing. Dead silence from the United Nations. They're not concerned about a bunch of Jews taken hostage by Muslim terrorists. They just want to protect the Islamic terrorists. The Biden administration could be leading instead of sending mixed signals. We've got dead American missionaries in Haiti, because this administration decided it was not going to go into Haiti and resolve the situation. It decided that it was not going to take a leadership role in the Western Hemisphere. So instead, it's handed a leadership role in the Western Hemisphere to an East African nation and possibly to the Chinese. The foreign policy of this administration is not the policy of grown-ups, but of children. It's not the policy of normal children, but children with schizophrenia. It's not a policy that anyone should be able to hold their head up and say is a sound policy. You've got Anthony Blinken playing the guitar in a bar in Kyiv while the nation burns there. They're now deciding whether or not they should allow the Ukrainians to start using American weapons across the border into Russia. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin, now that we've rearmed them with better weapons, is like, hey, you know what? I think we can do a ceasefire now on the territory that I've captured. Which is really just a way for Vladimir Putin to buy time to pull in more soldiers and resources to invade further. You've got the Chinese now arming the Russians with weapons. You've got the Iranians arming the Russians with weapons. You got the Houthis still shutting down traffic in the Red Sea, and this administration dithers. Joe Biden's been wrong about every major foreign policy disaster or every major foreign policy situation in the last 50 years, and he has presided over disaster after disaster, from Afghanistan to now what's happening with Ukraine, which was not invaded when Donald Trump was president, to Israel, which was not invaded when Donald Trump was president, to Taiwan, which was not surrounded by the Chinese Navy when Donald Trump was president, to Haiti, which was not collapsed and in gang violence with American missionaries being murdered when Donald Trump was president. The world is on fire, and Joe Biden and his administration think they've done a very good job. You know, Fahrenheit 451, it's the Ray Bradbury book. It's about a firefighter. Except in that time, the firefighter's job is to set the fires, to burn the houses where people kept books, because books contained prohibited knowledge. So if a house was found to have books, the firefighters would show up and burn the house down with the books and all. Joe Biden and his administration, they think they're firefighters. They are, from the Ray Bradbury Fahrenheit 451 concept, they set fires around the world. Their incompetence, their two-facedness, their willingness to set red lines that they don't enforce. And by the way, it's a good thing they haven't set the red lines. They never should have set the red lines, but it makes them now look dithering and weak that they did. It's incompetence on display. The left cannot be trusted with foreign policy in this country because the left hates the United States. The left is ashamed of the United States. The left thinks the world would be better off if the United States was not in a leadership role, and Joe Biden aims to make sure we can't be in a leadership role. They'd rather China be in a leadership role. They'd rather China bring peace to Haiti than the United States. They'd rather China bring peace to the world than us. They'd rather China be in charge so long as they're not helping the Russians. And Joe Biden, by the way, can't even figure out what he wants to do with Ukraine. He promises peace in our time in Ukraine and gives them weapons and then tells them, you're not allowed to actually use these things. I'm just doing it for show back home. All it does is it inspires our enemies to invade countries. All it does is it inspires our allies to look to our enemies for alliances, knowing we're not going to be there to help them. The International Court of Justice did what it did, as did the International Criminal Court, because Joe Biden didn't put his foot down. Because Joe Biden did not ahead of time tell them, you will not do this. You know why the rules exist globally? Let me tell you the dirty little secret. The reason the rules exist globally, we wrote the rules, and they were designed to keep the United States in charge. And when the rules aren't working for the United States to be in charge, we can reset those rules to make it so that we are in charge. These organizations are dependent on us, not China. We don't even need to fund the United Nations, and this is another reminder we should get out of the United Nations. The world would be better off with us out of the United Nations, engaged in multilateral treaties instead of UN heavy-handedness, where the terrorist nations get to be in charge of human rights. This is all a dereliction of duty from Joe Biden and a failure of Joe Biden. None of these things happened until Joe Biden became president. And if you want them to stop, you've got to get rid of Joe Biden as president. 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the phone number, that's the number. That's the right number. Let me jump to Tracy, who's been on hold. Tracy, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, what a shame that the Americans were killed in Haiti. And let us not forget there are 8 Americans being held by Hamas in Gaza.
Yes.
I wanted to add to your comment about seeing the sea of humanity cross our southern border. I am married to a Mexican who is a legal citizen of the United States. He followed the rules, he went through the process, and got his citizenship. My in-laws live in Mexico City. It is common for households in Mexico to employ household help, such as cooks, housekeepers, gardeners, drivers. Just last week, the driver and the gardener told my mother-in-law, tomorrow we're crossing the U.S. border. It's never been an easier time. No one asks us questions.
That's amazing.
It's a reality.
Have you seen the clip? It was on Fox News of the Turkish citizen who crossed the border and
Yes.
said, I'm really concerned it's this easy to get into the United States.
Yeah.
Y'all,
Absolutely.
this really happened. Tracy and I aren't making this up. There's actually Bill Malugin interviewed a Turk on Fox News yesterday, and the guy says, I'm really concerned with how easy it is to get across the border in the United States.
Well, back in
Wow.
the mid-1990s, our family traveled to Austria. I was the only U.S. citizen. The rest were Mexicans. And going into Austria, immigration saw the long line of my family and said, does anyone carry a U.S. passport? I waved mine. He said, come up here. Didn't even look at me as passport. Stamp, I was in. To the Mexicans, he said, now I need to see proof of your return tickets and your bank statements that show 3 months of expenses in the balance, because they wanted to make sure of certain countries exiting their country at the appointed time.
Doesn't surprise me. So, Tracy, I don't mean to ambush your conversation, and thank you for calling, but have your in-laws talked about the security situation in Mexico City? Because I know, like, for example, 2 days ago, there was a report in Cancun that tourists were having to duck, and I know that's away from Mexico City, just gang violence and the drug cartel violence down there getting out of hand.
Absolutely. That's why the common, let's call them middle-class Mexicans, have drivers, because they need that for their own safety and protection. A woman can't drive around Mexico City. They need to have a male driver for their own personal safety. And, of course, the proxy kidnappings have been happening for decades, where the kidnappers come to your housekeeper and say, unless your employer pays us $10,000, we will be showing up and kidnapping them, I don't know, this week. It's just a way of life. They know it's out of control. They certainly didn't like it when the Trump administration was on board, because it was hard on Mexico having to keep all the travelers in their country. They didn't like it. They want to pass them on through to the U.S.
Right.
It taxes their infrastructure to have them there. They make a way for them to cross. No impediments.
Yeah, it's just pitiful. Listen, thank you very much for the phone call. That's great information. Appreciate it a ton. Look, I mentioned Haiti and Israel stuff, but we've got a failing state south of us as well that this administration doesn't want to do anything about. It's just remarkable to watch the collapse of Mexico at the hands of the drug cartels, and this administration provides no leadership at all as the world burns. Now, I got to tell you about my bank, Old Glory Bank. I've had a bank account with them for over a year now. It is officially past the year mark that I've had my bank account with Old Glory Bank. And I've never been charged a fee for my checking or savings account. I get a competitive interest rate on my savings account. Their app is so useful. It's better than other banking apps I've used in that I can deposit cash with 88,000 retailers around the country. I can turn off and on my debit card. If I've misplaced it, if I've misplaced my wallet, I don't necessarily think it's been stolen, but I can turn it off. And if I find it, I can then turn it back on, or I can flag it as stolen and they'll disconnect it permanently. I can do it all through the app. Their budgeting apps is great. Their online bill pay is phenomenal. You can get an account with them in less than 8 minutes at oldglorybank.com. Oldglorybank.com. You can get one for your kids as well. Again, it's no fee checking, no fee savings. Get your kids into the 21st century banking with Old Glory Bank. Great bank accounts for them. Oldglorybank.com. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. I really do use Old Glory Bank. You really can use Old Glory Bank too, and you will be happy with them. Hello and welcome. It's Eric Erickson. Okay, have y'all heard about the latest Scotty Scheffler news? I'm fascinated by this story and also the people who just can't help but make political and racial angles as part of the story. So, the police officer was dressed with a yellow raincoat on, looked like the Valhalla security there in Louisville, Kentucky. And Scheffler says that security told him to do what he did. And then this guy tried to block his path. There was a misunderstanding. He thought it was security. And then the guy jumps onto his car, bashes on the window, demands he stops, and then arrests Scotty Scheffler. What the police officer says is that he jumps on the car. Scheffler drags him 10 yards. He falls to the ground. He's injured, his wrist and elbow. His pants are destroyed. And he says he has body camera footage of it all. Now the officer has been disciplined because it turns out he didn't have body camera footage. So he was serving only to help traffic. He wasn't actually assigned to investigate the death of the guy who got hit. He was just there to help with traffic and then assumed the role of police officer with Scheffler and arrest him, but didn't have body camera footage like he should have had if he was going to actually serve as an officer. So he's disciplined for that. Now his disciplinary record has come out, and he's had numerous disciplinary infractions, refusing to show up at court for hearings, things like that. My personal favorite is he did donuts in his police car with a drunk person in the passenger seat. He serves independently as an auto wreck investigator for outside entities and insurance companies. But the thing is that we now have camera footage. His body camera wasn't on, but there was a security camera on a light pole, and it caught most of it. Now, some of it was blocked by buses, but the man says he charged Scotty Scheffler, attaches himself to the car, and Scheffler continues to drive 10 yards, and he's dragged to the ground. Every witness has said this did not happen. Every witness has said that didn't happen. The officer insisted that it did, put it in the police report. Now we have this camera footage. He was never dragged. Scheffler never continued to drive. The officer ran after him when Scotty Scheffler pulled out of the line. Scheffler stops. You can see him beating on the window. The car never moves. Scheffler gets out. He's immediately arrested. All the things the officer said are things that aren't there. They really want to bring this thing to trial. They're going to get eaten alive. And the Louisville police have a history of these sorts of problems. And this officer has a very long history of just wild behavior at the police department. This is not a case the district attorney needs to bring, but they just might do it because it's Louisville. Wow.